You won't believe the wildest thing that's ever happened to me. I had a neighbor call the cops and try to slap me with a $2,000 fine, all because I was hunting on my own land. $2 grand. Can you believe that? The funny part is, she had no idea who she was messing with. My yoga and my patience are not something you want to test. I'll get to that soon enough, but let me just say a broken bar, the way this all ended still makes me laugh. By the time we're done here, you'll be thinking, wow, she got exactly what she deserved. So, picture this, it was a Tuesday morning, and everything felt almost too peaceful. The air had that crisp October bite I love, and I was on my back porch sipping fresh orange juice, watching a small family of deer wander across my yard like they owned the place. My property backs right up to a forest preserve, so wildlife is a regular sight, but something about the stillness of that morning made it feel a broken bar perfect. Looking back, that should have been my warning. Anyway, I'm Eric Johnson, 32 years old, and I've been living here for 3 years. My house isn't some massive mansion, but it's got 5 acres of land, which is exactly what I wanted. Room to breathe, some privacy, and space to enjoy my hobbies without bothering anyone. Or at least, that's what I thought. The place is tucked at the end of a quiet little cul-de-sac surrounded by old oak trees. It's basically my sanctuary, where I can escape the noise of everyday life. And with hunting season just starting, I was beyond excited. Now, I don't mess around when it comes to hunting. I'm careful, methodical. I double-checked my rifle, made sure the scope was perfect, and headed into the preserve. About an hour in, I spotted a deer near a clearing. Behind it, my carefully built dirt backstop stood ready, a project that had eaten up 2 full weekends of sweat and shoveling. Beyond that, nothing but hundreds of yards of thick forest. I'd been doing this for months, the same trail, same setup, always safe and responsible. But apparently, responsibility doesn't matter to some people. I was field dressing the deer when a high-pitched, furious voice tore through the trees. "What do you think you're doing?" I turned, and here came a woman crashing through the brush like she was ready to tackle me. Her blonde bob was catching twigs, her face red enough to match a stop sign, and I swear she was vibrating with rage. I'd seen her car around, always coming and going like she was late for everything, but we'd never actually met until now, and wow, what a first impression. "Good morning to you too," I said, trying to keep my voice calm as I walked toward the fence line. "I'm Eric Johnson, your neighbor. I'm hunting on the Federal Preserve, with all the proper permits. Everything's legal." I figured maybe she was just startled by the shots. A little explanation, and we could all go on with our day. But no, her face said absolutely not. "Legal? Legal?" she shrieked, her voice climbing into glass-shattering territory. "You're putting the whole neighborhood in danger. This is a civilized community, not a backwoods shooting range." She was shaking, pointing at me like I'd committed some crime against humanity. I tried not to laugh because honestly, it was absurd. Then came the kicker: "I'm calling the police and the HOA. Let's see how legal this is when they haul you off." And with that, she spun around, phone already at her ear, as she stormed off toward her house. Sure enough, about 30 minutes later, a police cruiser rolled up my driveway. Out stepped Officer Martinez, looking like a man who had seen far too many ridiculous neighbor disputes. To his credit, he was calm and professional the whole time. I showed him my hunting license, my federal permits, walked him through the property lines, and showed off the safety setup, including my dirt backstop. He nodded, jotted a few notes, and finally said, "Sir, your setup meets all safety standards. You're good." Boot a broken bar. Maybe give your neighbors a little warning next time. It'll save you some headaches. I figured that was fair enough. Maybe I could have been more neighborly and given a heads up before heading out to hunt. But Officer Martinez was satisfied that everything I'd done was completely legal, and I watched his cruiser roll away feeling relieved. At least the police had some sense, even if my neighbor didn't. But here's the thing: I wasn't angry. I was a broken bar curious. That woman's reaction didn't just scream annoyed neighbor. It was like she had been waiting for the smallest excuse to go nuclear. The speed with which she went from hearing a few shots to dialing the cops was bizarre. As I watched her retreat back to her house, a thought stuck in my head: this isn't over. Something about her energy felt a broken bar strategic, Like she wasn't just modest, she had a plan. She hadn't even tried to talk first, just went straight to the authorities like she wanted to make an example out of me. And I couldn't help but wonder, broken bar, what was her next move going to be? Days passed without incident. A week later, I started thinking maybe she'd calmed down, or found some new victim for her outrage. I was even half convinced that the police visit had scared her off for good. Then I opened my mailbox. Inside was a thick envelope, the kind that looks like it either contains a novel or bad news. The return address read Homeowners Association in stiff, official-looking letters. I figured it was probably some boring notice about landscaping or a reminder for a community meeting. Nope. When I opened it, the first thing that hit me was a $2,000 fine for something I had done perfectly legally on my own property. I actually laughed out loud. Across the top, in big bold red letters, were the words, "Violation Notice and Fine." Below it, the reason, "Violation of community safety regulations and noise ordinances. $2,000 for 3 shots on my land." I read it twice because I thought maybe I was hallucinating, and then I saw the signature, Rebecca Gray, HOA President. Of course, suddenly, the pieces fit. This wasn't about safety, this was personal. I could practically hear her shrill voice in my head threatening consequences. The notice claimed I'd committed multiple violations over the past 60 days. Complete with photo evidence attached. Reading it felt less like a real notice and more like someone had binge-watched a courtroom drama and decided they were now an expert in the law. Instead of getting mad, I grabbed my phone and called the HOA office. If they were going to fine me for breathing on my own property, I wanted to hear them justify it. After a few rings, a shaky voice answered. Hello, a broken bar HOA office. The woman on the line sounded like she was terrified someone was about to yell at her, and I almost felt bad. "Hi there," I said, keeping my voice friendly. "This is Eric Johnson. I just received a notice about a $2,000 fine, and I'd like to know exactly which regulation I supposedly violated." There was a long, uncomfortable pause. I could practically hear her debating whether to answer. "You broken bar, I just handle the paperwork, Mr. Johnson," she finally said, voice low. "Mrs. Gray, a broken bar, she handles all enforcement." "Shay, broken bar," she said, "you have 7 days to pay, or there will be serious consequences." The way she whispered serious consequences made it sound like she was reading from a script or repeating something she'd been ordered to say. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile forming. Something about this whole situation wasn't just unfair, it was fishy. "Consequences, huh?" I said, letting my voice sharpen just a little. "And what kind of consequences are we talking about?" The line went quiet for a moment, and I had the strangest feeling that this little neighborhood spat was about to turn into something much bigger and much more entertaining. Before she could answer, I slipped in another question. "And while we're at it, Amanda, broken bar, what regulation specifically covers firearms use on private property?" Silence. A long one this time. I could practically hear the poor woman sweating through the phone. "Yeah, broken bar, I'll have to check with Mrs. Gray and call you back," she said finally, and then the line went dead. I stared at my phone, realizing I had just uncovered something bigger than a simple fine. That evening, I turned into my own little Anadrama-nest investigation squad. I dove into every resource I could find about whole law, community regulations, and enforcement procedures. For hours, I was buried in legal websites, court cases, and state statutes. What I discovered was both fascinating and hilarious. HOAs can't just slap someone with a massive fine out of nowhere. There's a whole procedure: a formal notice, a grace period, documented hearings, and only then can they take legal steps like a lien or court action. Rebecca, my self-appointed neighborhood villain, had skipped all of that and gone straight to pay $2,000 or else. Rebecca just committed her first illegal act, I said to myself, printing out the statutes like a one-person legal army. As I flipped through the paperwork, I realized something else. Rebecca had been documenting my hunting trips for months. Photos, dates, times. She had been playing detective, probably thinking she was starring in her own Anadrama-nest episode. But the more I read, the clearer it became. Rebecca had no idea what she was actually doing. Right then, I made a decision. I wasn't paying the fine. Instead, I was going to document everything, every call, every paper, every suspicious move she made. I opened a new folder on my computer. Rebecca Gray A documentation, day 1. If she wanted a legal battle, I was going to fight with real laws, not her imaginary HOA rulebook. The next few days, I turned into a full-blown neighborhood detective. I requested every record a HOA meeting minutes, violation logs, financial reports, correspondence. Amanda, still sounding like a nervous extra in an Anna-Dramanesque courtroom scene, stammered through our conversations but had no legal choice but to hand everything over. When the documents finally arrived, my jaw dropped. The HOA cited regulations, they didn't exist. And the financial reports, they were a goldmine of corruption. Landscaping for community areas a $3,000 a build to Rebecca's house. Fence repair for shared property a $2,000 a also Rebecca's house. Road maintenance for community access a $1,500 a which only served her private driveway. Page after page, it was the same story. She's using the HOA as her personal piggy bank, I muttered, flipping through the pages in disbelief. Pool maintenance, her pool, tree removal, her yard, community security system, her own private cameras. But the worst discovery came when I dug into public court records. Rebecca Gray had a history, 3 previous neighborhoods, 3 harassment lawsuits, 3 illegal losses including 1 restraining order. Serial neighborhood tyrant, I muttered, leaning back in my chair. This wasn't just about a hunting fine anymore. This was about exposing someone who had been terrorizing communities for years, and this time, she'd picked the wrong neighbor. Most people probably just dealt with Rebecca or quietly moved away, but clearly, she had never faced anyone willing to dig this deep into her past. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. When I answered, Amanda's trembling voice came through this time, almost panicked. Mr. Johnson, a broken bar. Yeah, I'm calling from my personal phone. I can't stay silent anymore. Mrs. Gray, a broken bar. She's been making me forge meeting minutes, fake board signatures, even create violation notices for people who didn't do anything wrong. I have proof of everything. I can't keep doing this. My heart started racing. This was the Anna-Dramanesque twist I'd been waiting for. Real evidence, but it also meant Amanda was putting herself at serious risk. Can we meet somewhere private? She whispered. She has a whole file on you, Eric. Photos of your truck at the trailhead, you entering the preserve via broken bar, even your hunting schedule. She's been planning this for months. We met at a coffee shop 20 minutes away from the neighborhood, a forgettable chain where nobody would notice us. Amanda looked exhausted, her hands shaking as she ordered coffee, glancing over her shoulder every few seconds like Rebecca might burst through the door. She slid a flash drive across the table. This has everything, she said. When I got home and opened it, I nearly fell out of my chair. Forged meeting minutes from sessions that never even happened. Faked board signatures authorizing expenses that only benefited Rebecca. Email chains of her threatening neighbors with fake legal action. Folder after folder of surveillance photos of me, time-stamped and organized like some villain's scrapbook. Amanda's voice echoed in my head. Every violation notice, every fine, every board decision for the past 2 years has been completely made up. That night, my home office looked like a scene from an Anna-Dramanesque crime board. Printed emails, highlighted financial reports, fake signatures, surveillance photos. It was all there. Rebecca wasn't just abusing HOA power, she was running a criminal operation. Embezzling neighborhood funds, fabricating legal documents, harassing residents into compliance. I leaned back and whispered to the empty room, Rebecca Gray, you've been running this scam for 2 years, a broken bar, and your mistake was thinking you could mess with me. Hours later, I was still combing through the evidence when a sharp knock hit my front door. I froze. I didn't even need to check the peephole, I knew exactly who it was, Rebecca. And this time, it wasn't just about a fine. I felt the weight of the flash drive in my pocket and realized something. I wasn't just in a neighborhood dispute anymore. I was at the center of an Anna-Dramanesque showdown. I ignored her fine, I ignored her threats, and that silence seemed to drive her mad. Days passed without any response from me, and that's when her behavior shifted from controlling to a broken bar disturbing. The drive-bys began. At first, I thought they were coincidences, but then they became constant. She wasn't hiding it anymore. She'd cruise past my house a dozen times a day, sometimes slowing down, sometimes just staring. Rebecca Gray wasn't just my neighbor anymore, she was my stalker. Rebecca's drive-bys became a daily performance. She would slow down in front of my house, craning her neck to see what I was doing. Sometimes she'd stop completely, just sitting there in her car like she was waiting for me to commit a crime or star in my own episode of Anna Drama Nest. The feeling of being watched was suffocating. I tried to act normal, watering the garden, washing my truck, but deep down, I knew this wasn't going to end well. Then she escalated. One afternoon, I heard the sharp click of a camera. I looked up and saw her standing at the edge of my property with a massive telephoto lens, snapping pictures like she was the paparazzi and I was the latest celebrity scandal. At first, it was almost comical, then it became chilling. The clicking became a part of my daily life, like the soundtrack to my own personal Anna Drama Nest episode. But it didn't stop at photography. After a night of heavy rain, I went out to check my vegetable garden and browse muddy high heel prints in my backyard. Following the trail, I discovered someone had wandered all over my property, my hunting area, my storage, even peering into my garage windows. Rebecca Gray had trespassed in the dead of night. That was the breaking point. I started recording everything on my phone and called the police. I also rang up a lawyer and an ex-home member who had once crossed paths with Rebecca and lived to tell the tale. It was time to flip the script. Rebecca, however, had a new weapon: the city. Within a week, inspectors swarmed my property like it was a reality TV feature on Neighbors from Hell. Code enforcement for a dangerously overgrown lawn. It was immaculate. Zoning inspector for blocking public access. My truck was in my own driveway. Business license inspector for running an illegal home business. I wasn't. Each inspector rolled their eyes and admitted the complaints were bogus, but they still had to check. Amanda became my lifeline. She didn't just share info anymore, she sent emails, forged documents, and Rebecca's bogus accusations. She had become my crucial Anna Drama Nest ally in this battle. Then, Rebecca called the police again. Officer Martinez arrived, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Mr. Johnson," he sighed, "Mrs. Gray claims you made death threats against her. Care to explain?" I blinked, pressure washer in hand. "Officer, I haven't spoken to that woman since the day we first met." I gestured toward the street. "Alto a broken bar. She's been photographing me from her car for the past 2 hours if you'd like to see." Martinez glanced over. Sure enough, Rebecca's car sat parked, camera glinting. He gave her a stern warning about filing false reports and drove off. But not 10 minutes later, Rebecca strutted up to my fence again. This time, her face was smug, confident, like she was holding cards I couldn't see. I walked over slowly, my patience gone cold. "Rebecca," I said quietly, locking eyes with her, "you're digging yourself into a grave, and I guarantee it's deeper than you imagine." For the first time since this war began, I saw a flicker of fear on her face. "You think I'm scared of your phone?" she sneered, stepping back. Then she turned, tossing a final line over her shoulder. "I won't let this go, Eric." She walked away, but I knew it in my bone as if this Anna Drama Nest showdown was far from over. It was time to take action. I was about to call my lawyer when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Rebecca standing there with a smug little smile, holding a court summons like it was a trophy. The real fight had officially begun. I didn't waste a second. I drove straight to the courthouse to file my countersuit, my mind buzzing with strategy. The next morning, I called William Parker, a local attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. When I laid everything out for him, including the mountain of photos, videos, and Amanda's flash drive, he took 2 full hours to review it all, occasionally whistling low or shaking his head in disbelief. When he finally looked up at me, he seemed stunned. "Eric," he said slowly, "this woman has committed embezzlement, harassment, document forgery, trespassing, and abuse of power. We're past civil court here. This is criminal territory." The words hung in the air like a loaded weapon. "Meaning a broken bar?" I asked, though I already knew. "Meaning potential prison time," William said, stacking the files neatly. "But we need ironclad proof and undeniable, in-your-face evidence, something she can't spin in court." I nodded. "I can get that, but when I do, you need to be ready to move fast." That afternoon, I went shopping for professional-grade security gear. I'm talking 4K cameras, audio capture, timestamps, everything a paranoid anadrama-nest protagonist could dream of. By the time I was installing the last camera, I saw it. A shadow moving near the edge of my property. Rebecca, watching. Again, I finished my setup carefully, making sure every camera was hidden but covered all angles of the property. I even set up a bait zone along the fence, strategically placing my hunting gear where Rebecca would be tempted to snoop. If she trespassed again, I'd have her on crystal clear video. Amanda called that night, her voice urgent. "Eric, I found something that could take Rebecca down for good," she said. Her transformation from quiet neighbor to full anadrama-nest ally was complete. 2 days later, Amanda called again, her voice hushed. "Eric, broken bar, she's planning something big. She's ranting about a lawsuit demanding $10,000 in emotional damages and bragging about months of documented evidence. But that's not all she keeps talking about, finally shutting down your so-called illegal hunting operation. She says she's going to eliminate the problema broken bar permanently." Her last word echoed in my head. Eliminate? What exactly is she planning? I muttered after hanging up. And more importantly, how far was she willing to go? That's when I pulled out the piece of identification I had kept hidden all this time. A federal badge. I stared at it and smiled grimly. "Rebecca," I whispered, "you have no idea what a necessary means really looks like a broken bar, but you're about to find out." That night, I double-checked every camera, every sensor, every legal safeguard. I wasn't just setting a trap, I was choreographing her complete and total downfall anadrama-nest style. And this time, there would be no escape. This was her fatal mistake. The peaceful neighbor phase of this situation was officially over. She thought I was just some regular guy she could intimidate into submission. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Just as I secured the last hidden camera, my phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "She's coming tomorrow. Be ready." I don't think she's going to stop. Moments later, another text lit up the screen. She loaded bolt cutters and a hammer into her car. "She's planning something big. Be ready." A slow, predatory smile spread across my face. The anadrama-nest moment was finally here. I spent the night reviewing every piece of evidence one last time. By 5 a.m., I was in my kitchen, coffee in hand, watching the dawn break and waiting. Rebecca's car rolled into my driveway like she was staging a covert military operation. Head to toe in dark clothing, she slunk across the lawn with a hammer in one hand, bolt cutters in the other, and an oversized wooden sign tucked under her arm like some deranged suburban vigilante. I watched from the shadows as she crept around my house toward the backyard. Most people would have realized they were committing multiple felonies by now. Not Rebecca. She was fully committed to whatever unhinged plan she had cooked up in that twisted mind of hers. And the best part? Every move she made was captured in flawless 4K, with crystal clear audio and precise timestamps. Snap, snap, snap. Each fence cut echoed in the early morning air as my cameras caught her systematically destroying 20 feet of my property. Then, she pounded her ridiculous oversized sign into my lawn. "No hunting zone. Violators will be prosecuted by HOA." In bold, bright red letters. She was literally claiming my property as HOA territory. Illegal, absurd, and, frankly, hilarious. But then she went for the grand finale. After 20 straight minutes of felony vandalism, Rebecca pulled out her phone and called 911, her voice dripping with fake panic. "Emergency, Eric Johnson is violating the HOA hunting prohibition. I need immediate police response." There she was, standing on my destroyed property, surrounded by evidence of her own crimes, calling the cops on me for a broken bar existing. Meanwhile, Amanda called again, her voice low and tense. "Eric, broken bar, I found the smoking gun. HOA funds have been funneled into a private account at Rebecca's personal stash. This isn't about fines anymore. This is a full-blown scheme." 15 minutes later, Officer Martinez arrived. He stepped out of his car with the look of a man whose career had somehow devolved into refereeing anadrama-nest neighborhood wars. He found me sitting calmly on my porch, sipping coffee and reading a book, while Rebecca flailed her arms in the backyard like a wind-up villain. She jabbed a finger at her illegal sign, shrieking, "He's violating the hunting ban. Arrest him." Martinez's tired eyes scanned the wrecked fence, the ridiculous sign, and me, serene as a monk on vacation. "Mrs. Gray," he sighed, "what exactly is the emergency here?" Her voice pitched higher, trembling with frustration. "That sign proves it. He's guilty." Martinez blinked at her, clearly processing whether he was dealing with actual criminal activity or a full-on suburban breakdown. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "he's drinking coffee and reading a book." "What violation are you reporting exactly?" That was my cue. I stood up, calm as ever. "This situation is different today, officer. I have evidence showing who the real criminal is here." Rebecca's face drained of color. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. I invited Martinez inside and queued up the footage. There, in flawless high definition, was Rebecca cutting through my fence, pounding her illegal sign into my lawn, and calling 911 like a self-incriminating highlight reel. Rebecca's downfall was unfolding in perfect Anna Dramanesque fashion. The footage showed her hammering that absurd sign into my lawn, timestamps glowing in the corner, proving it all happened just minutes before her 911 call. Martinez stared at the screen, then back out the window at Rebecca, still standing in my backyard beside the wreckage she'd created. His expression went from confusion a broken bar to understanding a broken bar to pure professional disappointment. "Ma'am," he said as we stepped outside, "I need you to explain this footage to me." Rebecca stormed over, full of false bravado. "I demand to see it." I played the video on my tablet, her own crimes, crystal clear in high definition, from multiple angles. I watched her face crumble in real time, like a tower of ego collapsing under its own weight. "That's a broken bar fabricated," she screeched, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her panic. He manipulated the video somehow. Martinez just gave her the look of a man who had heard every excuse in the book. "Ma'am," he said flatly, "this is timestamped security footage from multiple cameras. This clearly shows you vandalizing Mr. Johnson's property." But I wasn't done yet. "Before we get into vandalism charges," I said calmly, "there's something else you need to know, something that makes this more than a property dispute." Martinez and I stepped back into my living room for a private conversation while Rebecca hovered outside, her hands twitching, peering through the window like a nervous raccoon. What I told him next changed everything. His entire demeanor shifted, posture straightening as the implications sank in. Moments later, my doorbell rang. Rebecca had returned with a cluster of officers standing behind her, and she tried to look victorious. "We have a warrant for your arrest," she said coldly, "for obstruction of justice." She thought she'd already won the Anna Dramanesque war. When Martinez and I returned outside, Rebecca's smile faltered. Something in his tone, now completely official, told her the storm had turned. "Mrs. Gray," he said, "I think it's time you understand exactly who you've been harassing." Rebecca crossed her arms, trying to project confidence. "I know exactly who he is, some backwoods hunter breaking HOA rules." That was the moment I chose to drop the hammer. I reached slowly into my pocket and pulled out my weathered leather wallet. With calm precision, I flipped it open. The glint of the federal badge hit her like a freight train. Her smirk vanished. "I'm Eric Johnson," I said, voice firm now, the tone I use at work. "Federal Wildlife Officer, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service." My hunting activities aren't just legal, they're part of my official duties, monitoring the Federal Wildlife Preserve bordering my property. Martinez's eyes widened, and his voice snapped to respectful attention. "Yes, sir, Officer Johnson. I had no idea about your federal status." Through the window, I saw Rebecca's face morph from pink outrage to ghostly white. She stumbled backward into one of my patio chairs, her legs unable to hold up her collapsing world. "You a broken bar, you're lying," she stammered, but her voice wavered like a cracked bell. No one believed her anymore. This wasn't a neighborhood squabble anymore. Rebecca had just committed crimes against federal property and obstructed a federal officer. Martinez listened as I laid it all out. Harassment of a federal officer, vandalism of property adjacent to federal land, filing false police reports. Then my attorney, William Parker, arrived like the final boss in this Anna Dramanesque episode. He carried a briefcase stuffed with HOA financial records, forged documents, and evidence of embezzlement. "Mrs. Gray," he said, spreading the papers across my table, has diverted over $7,000 from the HOA into a personal account. She has a documented history of harassment at multiple prior residences, and she forged community enforcement notices to justify her actions. Rebecca swayed on her feet. Her voice was barely a whisper now. "There's a broken bar. This can't be happening. I am the HOA president to broken bar. I enforce the rule as a broken bar." But the anadramanest had flipped. The enforcer had become the fugitive. The queen of the cul-de-sac had just lost her crown and her freedom. The authority in Rebecca's voice had already evaporated. The desperation in her eyes was unmistakable, and I could pinpoint the exact moment reality finally hit her. I didn't give her the chance to speak. "You're not in charge here anymore," I said evenly. "You've been breaking the law, and now it's time to pay for it." The air between us felt heavy. Rebecca's bravado collapsed, and Martinez stepped forward with finality. "Ma'am," he said, "you're under arrest for vandalism, harassment, filing false police reports, and obstructing a federal officer in the performance of his duties." The click of the handcuffs around her wrists was one of the most satisfying sounds I'd ever heard. The aftermath was swift and devastating. Within 24 hours, Rebecca was removed as HOA president in an emergency meeting. Federal charges were filed for obstructing a federal officer. The HOA demanded immediate repayment of the $7,000 she'd embezzled. I filed a $15,000 civil suit for harassment and property destruction. A 5-year restraining order barred her from even walking near my property. Past victims came forward, triggering an FBI investigation into her forged documents and financial crimes. Rebecca Gray's world collapsed faster than anyone imagined. But the real victory was watching the neighborhood come alive again. Amanda stepped in as interim HOA president and immediately reversed all of Rebecca's oppressive, illegal policies. Neighbors who had been living in fear finally spoke out. We learned of all the petty and cruel things Rebecca had done, threatening families over children's chalk drawings, ordering patriotic decorations to be removed for being unsophisticated, harassing elderly neighbors over minor lawn imperfections, using HOA funds to upgrade her own home. The neighborhood had been under her private dictatorship. And finally, anadramanest delivered justice. Smiles returned to porches. Kids played freely in their yards again. Elderly residents tended their gardens without fear. A week later, I sat on my porch with a glass of fresh orange juice, watching deer graze in my yard. No more shouting at the fence. No police visits. Just peace. Amanda texted me a message that made me laugh. "Thank you for liberating us. The entire neighborhood is celebrating. We're planning a community barbecue, and you're the guest of honor." I raised my orange juice toward my security camera and smirked. Never underestimate the quiet neighbor. Sometimes the calmest person is the one you really shouldn't mess with. Rebecca Gray thought she ruled her little HOA kingdom with an iron fist. She thought she was untouchable, but in the end, she was just a small-time criminal who picked the wrong fight. The mailbox that once held her threatening letters now delivered thank you cards from neighbors. The fence she destroyed had been rebuilt stronger. Amanda ran a transparent, honest HOA. And Rebecca? She was sitting in federal detention, facing multiple felony charges. Her reign of terror was over. With a final sip of orange juice, I watched the deer grazing in the soft morning light. Justice had taken its time, but when it arrived, it was perfect. If you've stuck with me through this anadramanest, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever faced a Karen in your life? Drop a comment below. And if you enjoyed this story, hit that little thanks button to support the channel. Anadramanesto, where neighbors feud, secrets spill, and karma always clocks in. Stick around, we've got receipts.